Have you ever really thought about the rules that run the world around us? I don't mean our rules, but nature's rules. You know, from a tiny backyard garden all the way up to the entire planet, everything, and I mean everything, operates on this set of deeply connected principles. So today, let's pull back the curtain and uncover the hidden logic of our environment.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics, what an ecosystem even is. Then we'll follow the flow of energy, who eats whom. After that, we'll get into a simple but powerful rule that governs all of that. And finally, we'll look at our own impact, right down to the trash we leave behind.
So first things first, we need to get a handle on the fundamental building block of nature, and that is the ecosystem.
Okay, this might seem like a random question, but seriously, what does a garden, a pond, and even a fish tank have in common? Well, they're all these little miniature worlds, right? They're all perfect examples of ecosystems, where life is constantly interacting with its surroundings.
So, an ecosystem, in simple terms, is just a whole community of living things and the non-living stuff in one place, all working together. You can think of it like a grand play. You've got the actors, and you've got the stage they perform on.
And if you break it down, every single ecosystem has two sides to it. You've got the biotic, or living parts. That's your plants, your animals, all the little microorganisms. And then you have the abiotic, or non-living parts. Things like the temperature, the soil, the wind, and the water. You absolutely cannot have one without the other.
Okay, so now that we've met all the players, both living and non-living, let's get into the game they're all playing. And it's a game of survival, which really boils down to one simple question. Who eats whom?
In pretty much any ecosystem, all the living things fall into one of three main jobs. First, you've got the producers. These are the green plants, the absolute heroes that make their own food from sunlight. Then you have the consumers, which are all the creatures that eat the producers or, well, other consumers. And last, but definitely not least, you have the cleanup crew, the decomposers. These are the bacteria and fungi that break everything down and return all those good nutrients back to the soil.
And here's how all those roles connect in what we call a food chain. Each of these steps is what scientists call a trophic level. It's basically just an energy level. It all starts with the producers, like plants. They get eaten by primary consumers, your herbivores, and they in turn get eaten by secondary consumers, the carnivores. See, it's a straight-up transfer of energy.
But, you know, nature is never that simple, right? It's rarely just a straight line. It's way more like a messy, complicated food web. See, most animals get eaten by more than one kind of predator, which creates this incredibly complex, tangled map of who's eating who.
All this talk about energy flowing through a web brings up a really important question. Where does all that energy actually go? And the answer, my friends, is in one of the most surprising and important rules in all of ecology.
But before we get to the rule itself, we have to remember where it all begins. For almost every single living thing on this planet, the ultimate power plant is the sun. Solar energy is what keeps the whole show running.
Now, get ready for this, because it's kind of mind-blowing. Of all the solar energy that hits the leaves of plants on Earth, they only manage to capture and turn about 1% of it into food. Just 1%. That's the entire energy budget for pretty much all life on this planet. And here's the crucial part. This energy only moves in one direction. It flows from the sun, to a plant, to the rabbit that eats the plant, to the fox that eats the rabbit. It never, ever goes backward.
And that brings us to the famous 10% rule. On average, only about 10% of the energy from one level actually makes it to the next level up. So where does the other 90% go? Well, it's lost as heat. It's used for just staying alive, for breathing, for moving. It's just gone. This has huge implications, by the way. It means it's way more energy efficient for the planet to eat lower on the food chain.
So what does this 10% rule actually mean for an ecosystem? Well, because so much energy is lost at every single step, there just isn't enough left to support really long food chains. That's why you almost never see food chains with more than 3 or 4 levels. There's just not enough gas left in the tank to go any further.
Okay, so we've got the natural rules down. Now it's time to talk about us. How are we, as humans, changing the game? What kind of footprint are we leaving on these incredibly delicate systems?
One of the most subtle, but also one of the most dangerous ways we impact things is through a process called biological magnification. This is what happens when we introduce nasty chemicals, like certain pesticides, that just don't break down. Instead of vanishing, they just hang around and build up in living things. So here's how it works. The chemicals get into the soil or the water where they get absorbed by tiny organisms. Then, as bigger creatures eat those smaller ones, the toxin gets more and more concentrated. By the time it reaches the top of the food chain, which is often where we are, that concentration can be super high and super dangerous.
And it's not just about the stuff we add to the environment. It's also how we mess with what's already there. Take ozone, for instance. Ozone is fascinating because it has this total split personality. Way up high in the atmosphere, it's our essential shield, protecting us from the sun's UV rays. But down here at ground level, it's a deadly poison. Same exact molecule, totally different story depending on where it is.
You know, this is actually a pretty hopeful story. Back in the 80s, scientists figured out that chemicals called CFCs, the stuff they used in aerosol cans and refrigerators, were literally eating a hole in that protective ozone layer. But then, in 1987, something amazing happened. The world actually came together and agreed to phase them out. And today, it's mandatory for companies all over the world to make their products CFC-free. It's an incredible example of what we can do when we cooperate.
All right, for our final section, let's talk about something we all create every single day: garbage. Figuring out what to do with our waste is, without a doubt, one of the biggest environmental challenges we face.
Basically, all our trash falls into one of two buckets. You've got biodegradable waste, things like food scraps or paper, that can be broken down naturally by microorganisms. But then you have non-biodegradable waste, like plastic. That stuff can't be broken down. It just sticks around for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. And the story of the disposable cup is a perfect example of how tricky this problem is. So plastic cups were creating a massive waste problem. Okay, so someone suggested switching to traditional clay cups. Sounds great, right? Except making them on a huge scale would have destroyed tons of fertile topsoil. So the compromise for now is paper cups. It just goes to show you, when it comes to waste, there are rarely any easy answers. So, we'll end with this thought. Understanding these rules of our environment isn't just about learning facts, it's empowering. Simple choices we make every day, like carrying a cloth bag or just switching off a light, are all ways we can work with these hidden rules, not against them. We've seen just how connected everything is, from a ray of sunlight to the cup in your hand. So the real question isn't just what choices you'll make, but how will you see your own place in this incredible, intricate web now that you know the rules?